at the Monitor Group, Michael Porter and his team and those guys, where they do reverse engineering, where they reverse engineer the idea and say, what can I do with it and how can I make it real? And what's first things first. So there's lots of little nuggets here. And I just mentioned 3 of them. I'm sure there's a lot more. I'm sure Ron and Brett might be able to mention others also.
Yeah, I think the ones that Hitendra mentioned are clearly foremost in kind of our work and our minds, and getting both an outside in and an inside out view of all of those dots. So more and better dots that you can connect in creative and compelling ways is what innovation is, kind of at the heart of innovation. I mean, when I was like 5 years old, my grandmother said, find your own North Star and connect your own dots to form your own constellations. And that's a lot about, my whole life, that's a lot about what I've learned about innovation. But the other things that I think are critical, kind of easy tools, are the whole concept of how do you take the fields of play that you develop out of the BOM, et cetera, and how do you create platforms for growth, platforms to create and capture sustainable value for your organization. And how do you identify and map and roadmap the cats that you need to build, the competence you need to build in yourself and your organization, the assets, the technologies to stay ahead of the curve and be an innovation leader in that space. So I think that the whole concept of platforms and cats that came out of probably 50 years at Arthur D. Little. I was only there for 25, but this was the whole thing around kind of both make, collaborate, buy decisions for how you become leader in the critical cats. But it started with technology road mapping and R&D road mapping, but it was equally and better even applied in the field of innovation. So there are some simple, there are some tools that help you simplify the complexity of dealing with innovation. And I think those are important ones that are featured in our training.
Ron, just I want to capture something from the platforms that you mentioned. Can we mention in one sentence why this the platform concept is powerful for a company?
Well, let me go to the call I just had at 4 o'clock this morning with OCP and the King of Morocco and the chairman of OCP. They have a whole bunch of R&D projects going on with different universities, MIT, ILP, et cetera, to deal with this particular issue. So we got them a few months ago to identify must-win battles. But this one is really essential, but they don't have a way of, everything's going on in different parts of the company. They don't talk to each other. They are organized kind of in silos, unfortunately, still. And so platforms are a way of managing and a way of driving a bunch of things you need to do to become a leader in that field of play. And so that platform concept is one of the best ways I find to get people working together across silos and across outside partners.
Clear. Thank you, Ron. Brett, for you, what's the typical tool or concepts when it comes to help a team drive ideas to commercialization that is the most powerful, or during your experience you have found?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons when I originally founded the IOIP was because I was very concerned about just out of control innovation and a lot of resources being wasted, a lot of people's dreams being dashed. There's a really old story that I like that some of you may have heard, but it's I think it came out of the 60s or 70s, called the Abilene Paradox. And it goes something like this. This family's in Coleman, Texas. They're playing dominoes on the porch. They're happy, but it's hot as heck, just like Texas can be sometimes. And then all of a sudden, the husband pops up and says, hey, I think we should go to this cafeteria in Abilene, Texas. That's 50 miles away. And the wife says, yeah, sounds like a great idea. He didn't really want to go. The drive's long and hot. He thinks he must be out of step with the group. So he says, well, sounds good to me. I hope your mother wants to go. Mother says, of course I want to go. Well, anyways, they drive, the hour plus to Abilene. The food is as bad as the drive. And then eventually they come back and one of them says, well, that was a great trip, wasn't it? And the other one says, no, actually, I'd rather have stayed home. It was kind of hot. The food wasn't great. And the husband says, well, I wasn't really that happy either. But, I only went because the rest of you guys wanted to go. And so pretty soon after they talked through it, they realized that nobody wanted to go to Abilene, Texas. It just got out of control. Right? Well, frankly, I don't want to go to Abilene, Texas either, but I'm sorry if there's anyone from Abilene there. But the moral of the story is that we get caught up in these ideas, and innovation is particularly susceptible to getting caught up in ideas. Hey, I've got this idea, let's do this. Everybody goes along with it because it was the CIO's idea or the CEO's idea or something like that. I wanted to get that under control. And that was one of the big things I think we learned from the innovation process is how to get those ideas in control, critically evaluate them, and make sure they're really good ideas.
Really, if I can add one more comment around this methodology, is all the language of blue ocean, disruptive innovation, agile, sprint, design thinking, that's all embedded in the methodology, in the how. So it doesn't dwell so much on what you have to do, but how to make innovation real. So in there is, where's your blue ocean? Where are you going to win in the future? Ron talked about the platforms and the focus areas for a company. In there, embedded in there is what are the best ideas in the world? And those ideas would come from the future, from trends, or the past, or the present, or competitors, or adjacencies. That's there too. When you put those ideas together, working in teams to bring the best concepts together, to build a team to execute it, the team building happens through the process. And then in the concept, as you build it, there's also the connection. How will you produce it? How will you actually distribute it? What's your business model? How will you make money from it? That's there too. And then how do you get started? Who will partner with you to make these things real? So there's a whole bunch of things which have been put together, which are now, people talk about individually as design thinking, or they talk about individual business model, or individually as Scrum or Agile and all that. It's all embedded in the methodology. And consistently, this methodology has been used over thousands of companies, thousands of individuals to deliver consistently outputs, consistently. And that's where the power, I think, is. It's a system.
Thank you, HP. I think let me go and ask a little bit again from participants' point of view. And we have touched based on a lot of great concepts, framework, methodology. But when they use this methodology and beyond the course as they go back into their day jobs, what are the benefits this offers to them? And not just to the individual, but also to the company they work for, which might be their own or they're leading in some context.
Brett, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've seen a lot of is, let's just call ourselves an unusual group of people. We're innovators, and everybody on this call is interested in innovation. And we've probably all had that. And I can tell you it's happened my entire career. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And that was, I've got this idea, I get excited about it, and it gets shot down because you're too young or you're in the wrong department or something like that. The course actually helps you to figure out how to start to move those ideas forward without sounding like an insane person. Because, we've all been there. And finally, it's acceptable to bring new ideas. It's acceptable to be just a little bit crazy. I mean, Steve Jobs did the whole commercial on the Misfits. And for the first time, I think in a very long time, us misfits are finally in a position, but we can't blow the opportunity, because if we go in there wild-eyed and crazy and throwing our arms in the air and all that kind of stuff, we're still going to be perceived as crazy. And that's why the certification and the coursework and the support group here, it allows us to be a little more legitimate and to learn how to control and put process around what other people might have thought we were crazy about before.
I think it also, innovators and inventors used to be thought of as crazy individuals. I agree. Increasingly, crazy individuals and cowboys and cowgirls don't make things happen in a company. They may be entrepreneurs, but in a company, it's difficult for them as individuals to create a driving force for change. This course, the materials, the networks you build, beyond giving you the individual competence and confidence to do things. It gives you a method or a process, a roadmap for building a team that has a common language, building a team that has a common language, a compelling language, a simple way to, or a way to simplify complexity so that you can rally a team around it, you can rally a senior leadership team around it, and you can make things happen in an organization. So it's as much, if not more, about building that team, building that common language. So when you walk away, don't think you can be God or king or something else and make it happen. It has to be something you can use as a tool to build that common language, that compelling case for change, and these simple tools that people say, wow, I get it. That's easy. I can make that happen, and combine it with this tool and that tool and this approach and these stories, and really create a critical mass of people, a network, a team that can make things happen.
Yeah,
Thank you,
from
Ron.
from my side, when I was at Motorola, we had an extreme respect for our seniors. And that was part of the culture, that the seniors had a whole bunch of dots and knowledge of the past, and therefore they were experts. And so young people would come in and always respect the seniors. It was expected to do that. But to liberate the young people with their creativity and everything else, they also send the young people for training for Six Sigma, training for innovation, training for other things. And then they would come back with certificates. At the end of the training, you would get a certificate, which gave them the right to practice. I want to say, I emphasize this point, the right to practice. So there's often in many companies, senior people will say, you don't know anything, you've not been around. And that's a big danger, that the seniors are partially right, but they may be also not seeing the world in the same way. So if you really want to democratize innovation and you want everybody to have permission or the right to practice, the certificates are very powerful rights to practice. It's like getting an MBA. The day before the MBA, you're just nobody. Now you're an MBA, you have a certificate. And now you can do something. So with innovation certificates, as much as Six Sigma certificates or PMI certificates, you can now sit at the table with other people and say, this is how I think, this is how my ideas, and you have the right to be at the table. So for me, it does provide credentials to be able to work with people who are all in innovation. And it provides the credentials for you to have confidence and competence to be able to do the work that is real. So I personally really believe in credentials. People need them sometimes to be able to speak up and talk, or actually be at the table with the most senior people who can sometimes shut you up. And they do.
Great, thank you, Tendra. Well, this is the question I like most, because I have heard many stories from you, like specific stories for Pepsi, Johnson Control, how you help different CEOs or CIOs basically to grow into the role of innovation, right? And to come up with some of the most breakthrough products, processes that we have seen. So I'd like each of you to think and mention one story, one interesting story, how you helped or supported one person, might be a CEO, might be a CIO, basically of a big company, and how you supported them to grow into the role of innovation and eventually the company. And maybe I would like to start this from Ron, from the largest experience that he has.
The longest, not necessarily the largest. Thank you, Arila. So I'm going to violate your guidance and combine three stories into one, as is my tendency. So they're very similar. So I worked for a long time for the head of R&D at SC Johnson, and for his direct boss, the CEO and owner of the company, Sam Johnson. And he was a pure R&D guy, and he and Sam didn't really connect. And so my journey with him was to transition from R&D to innovation, get more support from the senior leadership team and the business units, create current value as well as future value, create leadership for the company, create a program that got people scouting around the world for new ideas, corporate new product technologies. And so that was kind of his journey to his credibility and to the power of his organization, which had been an R&D organization locked in a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which I loved, but it was still an isolated building for the R&D group at SC Johnson. Similarly, Kaz Skripczak, who was head of R&D for Verizon and worked for a well-known kind of entrepreneur, Ivan Seidenberg, who was chairman of the board, et cetera, of initially New England Telephone, and then New England, 9X Bell Atlantic, and then Verizon, the largest by far telecom and communications company in North America, and probably the world, but certainly in North America. And again, Kaz says, well, here's my portfolio. I have this big project on video, kind of TV on the telephone, basically. And Kaz said, how long is that going to take to happen? This was I'm old, so this was probably during the 70s. And Kaz said, oh, probably 10 years. And Ivan said, I won't be around 10 years from now. What do you got that's got some near-term and long-term implications for the company? And so it was, again, working with a head of R&D who was out there with what if and what's next, to connect it with things that could please a CEO who was constantly even charging money to use a styrofoam cup in the cafeteria to get everybody focused on cost. And then when Kaz said, how am I going to do, what about this area I want to get funded? And he said, yeah, if you don't do it, I'm going to blame you when it comes to the board. And the board says, why weren't you all over this area? And so he found a way, or we helped him find a way to kind of bridge way beyond R&D to things that really made a difference to the chairman of the board and everything else. And this is a similar story at JCI. You know, in that case, so we worked with teams. It wasn't so much an individual, but it was teams who reported to the heir apparent for CEO of JCI. And it was giving that person, the heir apparent, a lot more power and influence, because this current CEO was clueless about innovation, but knew it was critical. But that was empowering the teams in each of the separate business units to drive forward and make things happen, that people said, wow, we need to make this something that works across the company. So all three were similar, helping companies transition rapidly. Speed was of the essence, with both individuals and teams, not just one-star student or one-star innovator, but really to build the culture, build the teams, build the networks that made a difference.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Brett, what's your story?
Well, you know, I've been a consultant most of my life, and you know, that means that you really know everything about soccer and you've never played soccer. So I've spent a lot of time where I really pride myself in my past with stories around innovation and et cetera, is really taking hold of middle managers and helping them either move on or move out, giving them the expertise that they need. And I've been really proud of some of my folks. Sometimes you can't talk about these projects and you can't talk about these people because you were never there. Kind of like a spy or something. I was never there, but you know, it happened. And so you know, that's where I am particularly proud of different governments that I've worked with. I've worked with government officials. I've worked with CEOs of companies all over the world. And I keep track of these people, and some of them are entrepreneurs. Many of them are entrepreneurs because they couldn't find their place in a bureaucracy, so they've become startup people. And I have a little, you know, relationships with a lot of these startups and stuff. So that's what I'm proud of, is just helping a lot of people in the middle move up, take responsibility, and find what their true calling is.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Hitendra, if you can share a specific one, maybe starting by the problem, what was the problem and how you helped this person basically with that?
Yeah, again, it's very hard to narrow it down to one specific, but most of the problems that I work with has always been top down and bottom up. So how do you get the CEO to stand up and say innovation is important and we're going to drive innovation across the company? And then how do you make sure it sticks from the bottom up? And so people can do that for forever. Best examples of this, I think Ron talked about Johnson Controls. You know, we were with the CEO and we asked the CEO to get on stage along with his whole leadership team and invited them from all over the world to come into this big meeting in London. And we basically presented to all of them what innovation was. He said it's important. Then he says, each one of your BU heads get up on stage and tell me what resources you'll put behind it and what projects, because I brought Hitendra and Ron here with their team to help us make this thing real. And then what we did with each of the business unit heads, and they were very different. From one was in engine business efficiency, another one was in interior of cars, and so one other group was on batteries. That each of them had to provide 5 teams, create ideas for what their businesses were going to do next, which were in the future. And then we put accelerators in place to make them real from beginning to end. We call them pursuit teams and realization teams. And then from the bottom up, we were working with HR to make sure that these guys would get rewarded, recognized for what they were doing. So even working from the HR side, so we were training, we were creating a common language, a common framework to make all that happen. That's one example, I think, that was really powerful in how we deployed it. But the one which I think is usually more interesting and exciting sometimes is where you work with a company and you really shift the business. There's a plastics company we worked with, and they were plastic. They were a plastic company. And this is about 10, 15 years ago when recycling and renewal was, we were just talking about it. And we completely transformed the company into being a green polymer, green plastics company. And behind that, the science and technology to make things green and plastic. Behind that, all that, to find the partners who would help you do that. And we built a whole network of how we can create a new future called green plastics. Now, in there, our job was always to talk about this thing, the future. It was very uncertain and ambiguous. And in there, to give the leaders that they could visualize it. And that's our biggest challenge. How do you make it visualizable that everybody else understands what the future looks like? And then underneath that, to see where the competencies exist to make it real. And to find the partners and to get the quick wins immediately to make that happen. And so it was always a little bit of chutzpah. That's part of innovation. Believe in what's out there, but then driving them forward into some sort of meaningful results that people start believing it's possible. And then 10 years later, they forget us. They forget that we were even present, and they're walking around celebrating they're the greenest companies in the world, or they're the best cement concrete company in the world because now they're in construction, or they're the best beverage company in the world because they got healthy beverages now versus carbonated beverages. And that's what we do. So it's really, really fun, a lot of excitement, but we help create the future. We help imagine the future. We choose the future we desire, and we make it happen.
Thank you, HP.
Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. Really, those are really inspiring words. So HP, Ron, Brett, thank you. I think in the interest of the time, maybe Arila, we can take some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Since we have 10 minutes left. So to all, it's an open shout out to all participants. If you have questions, please raise your hand and ask.
Dog has a question.
Yes.
Oh, the
Okay.
cat.
I see Lindo Kule raising his hand.
Linda Kulik. Yeah, go ahead.
Am I audible?
You're audible.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindo Gusle from South Africa, Ian Group. So my question is a simple one in terms of how do we strike the balance between like becoming the innovators, the crazy minds, and even with just your social issues, like being, because before an innovator, you are a father to someone, you are a brother to someone. How do we strike that balance rather than we just always struck on the fantasy and being crazy about innovation? Thank you.
For me, I don't think you need to be like the Motorola's and the Sony's or the Philips who came to the world and created things we had never imagined. You can also be a really good fast follower and do really well with what has succeeded in the world, like the Samsungs who make cell phones, and even Apple, who's a fast follower of many innovations, right? So there's nothing wrong with being a fast follower, but doing it really well because the market needs it, and you just do a better job of doing it with innovations in there, with better business models and other things. The only thing that you should not be is a laggard. If your neighbors are going faster than you, if your neighbors are doing better than you, then you need to run faster. But the choice of being a pathfinder for innovation or a fast follower does not mean that you cannot innovate. You can innovate. We got 9 out of 10 companies in every industry is fast following a leader, a pathfinder. And they're all doing it in their own way. So I would encourage you not to necessarily make that choice. Just understand what you like to do, what your company likes to do, and then do it such that you did better, faster, and cheaper to be able to do competitively things that give you sustainable growth. Ron?
And I would avoid trying to do it alone. Form a team, a diverse team, build a common kind of approach, language, call for action, so that you have a whole team that's aligned with making change happen. You may not even call it innovation. You may call it business creativity, like one of the clients we're working with now. Call it whatever it is, but form a team and get that team engaged with helping build that compelling call for action with your senior management.
While we're waiting for questions, I
But-
think
We have another question. Let me address it. I think it's a great question. So this is a question from David Fernandez, and he's talking, how do you integrate and adopt innovation system on a company that already think they are innovators and they are succeeding in the market? And I think this is a great question, bringing the consulting experience from three of you, is how do you kind of convince these companies who think they are already innovators on and much far on their journey?
Well, I'll start this one because I've seen this so many times as a consultant and a lot of years in consulting. Is the world just passes you by. You think you're the best, you think you're the greatest. Coca-Cola, back when Pepsi just ate their lunch, they were Coke. It was their culture. Everybody loves Coca-Cola. We don't need to do anything except Coca-Cola. And then PepsiCo came out and started doing snacks and fruit drinks and bottled water. And all of a sudden, Coca-Cola woke up one day and said, we're not Coca-Cola anymore. We're just, nobody cares. The world passed us by because of the hubris and believing that we were the best. And I hate to tell you, the world doesn't stop. The world continues to evolve. The world continues to change, and it's doing it faster and faster these days. So if you assume that you're the best and you're the most innovative, you probably are, but you might not be tomorrow.
if I can add to what Brett said, I think one is, of course, the recognition that you got to always innovate and be on top of your game. But there's something to be said when somebody says, I am innovative already, how can you help me? And my experience has always been, where do you need help versus saying you're wrong in whatever you're doing. So within the whole innovation system, there's so many elements and components that you have to manage that you can't be perfect on all of them. So it could be, do you have a clear strategy for innovation? Do you have the right people and processes for innovation? Are you partnering well enough? Are your teams really trained to do the right thing to make it happen? So a good assessment of the whole innovation system will always relieve weaknesses across the thing. It doesn't matter what company you're at. It's hard to manage innovation, and you'll find some gaps. And I would work on where the weaknesses are you can help them with. They'll be more likely to listen to you instead of going to where they're doing really well and say, no, I can help you do better. There is gaps. And the ones that I think Ron and others have identified over the last 10 years is partnering, teaming. These are the hardest ones to do because it's about people. And people are a pain to work with until you learn to work with each other. And partnering is even harder. It's like, there's no handbook on how to partner like a marriage. There's no handbook on how to do this kind of things. So focus on the hardest things that companies can't do around innovation and help them there.
And I think a simple tool for a lot of companies we've worked with, as both Brett and Hitendra said, are in a stage of complacency. They're a little nervous. That's why you're talking to them, because they feel good about what they are now, but are a little unsure about the future. I think introducing them to kind of outside-in views of alternative scenarios, alternative options, what could happen over the next 5 years? What if it happened twice as fast? Are you ready for this? What do you have that makes you ready for this? If the chairman of the board says, why didn't you tell me this was going to happen? And you said, well, I thought it was 10 years away. That's not good enough. So you're working with teams, and part of it is build an insurance policy for what if and what's next, and find a way, without telling them they're not doing a good job, telling them they may not be ready and there's other things they need to do to get ready for what's next. As Brett said, it's going to happen faster than you think.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, HP. Thank you, Brett. I think we have a similar question from Marina, but it's more specific to the fashion and consumer brands industry. She has a background in merchandising and product development, and she's talking about how do you bring innovation to this industry, specifically when they are already creative, they are working on the customer experience, they are bringing out so many products very often into the market. And how do you kind of help these guys, and how do you bring innovation to the table for this particular industry?
For me, I think the word is business model innovation. And it's not the product that makes you win. There's lots of people creating amazing designs, amazing clothes, amazing whatever. Just because you can create a product doesn't mean you're going to win in the market. The way you win in the market is which partners do you work with to go to market faster? How do you do your pricing to do it right? How do you get the right influencers to be able to see this first or second to talk about it? How do you produce it cheaper, maybe in China or somewhere else, versus how you're producing it right now? So it's a whole value chain that you got to think through. So you like to use the word business model innovation. And please don't get stuck on just product innovation, creativity on that area. It's the whole thing. And you got to win across all of them to be able to win big.
Thank you, HP. It was great.
The sun just came up, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm facing the sun, and I'm due on set in a few minutes. So I will just say, you know, what's interesting is you look at somebody like a Bombas. They make socks and underwear. Now, what could be innovative about socks and underwear? It's the fact that they donate a pair of socks and a pair of underwear for every one you manufacture. Are they really a better product? I own some socks. They seem like any other pair of socks I've got. So some of it is the angle that you market at. Some of it's the way you see the world. Are we out there for a social cause, or are we creating something that's going to end up on a barge off of the coast of Haiti, and nobody wants the fast fashion? We've got to start looking at this in the fashion industry, because we do produce. Every one of us has something from the fashion industry on our backs, on our chest right now. I mean, I've got the thing. So looking at that, looking at new ways of approaching your markets, I think is critical right now. And that's where I think innovation can happen in that industry.
And as Brad has said, there is no one silver bullet. You can have Taylor Swift as your fashionista. That's not going to make that makes a little bit of a difference, maybe even a lot, but not for long. And so there are probably 50 different levers you can pull to become a sustainable innovation leader in the fashion industry. You don't have to be pulling all of them. You have to pick which ones work for you. You can read the book for Patagonia. He was great about explaining all the levers he had and why he chose the ones he did. Different part of the fashion industry, but still fashion. It was getting color. It was doing lots of things that he hadn't tried before. And so I think there are multiple levers to pull. You need to be aware of what all those levers are, pull them wisely, but it is the power of and. It's not choice. I'm going to just pull this lever and have this design of the day and win, because that's not even a battle. That's a kind of confrontation. So what are the must-win battles? How are you going to pull your army together? Your army of people who work for you, your army of suppliers, your army of lead customers and early adopters. How do you pull them together and make them part of what you're doing to lead the fashion world, whether it's in underwear or shoes or outerwear?
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Hitendra. Thank you for the wise words. And I'd like to spend maybe the last minute. And of course, if you want and you have any question, we can have maybe Hitendra or Ron to stay for a little bit longer, but I just want to do the last call for action, because we are starting on March 19th. Basically, the course, Certified Innovation Professional, is 8 weeks. First level is 4 weeks. It starts on March 19th. It's 6 hours per week, starting on Tuesday and Thursday. We'll have Hitendra as the main lecturer. We'll have Ron, we'll have Brett, and we'll have Rohan, David, and other. Basically, guest lecturers, and for the second level we will work on a real challenge basically, or a project that you might have in your company, and we will work as a team, and that will be 4 weeks, and we'll have different mentors helping you go through this experience. It's an amazing course. From the our experience working with different companies, different universities, professionals, all of them have remained, have become members, become ambassadors, become partners, clients, and all this, and has been amazing so far. So we will close the registrations this week. These are the last seats. Let us know. I know that some of you have been interacting with me. Let me know for any question that you might have, but many of the stories that we heard today, like the real stories from the experience, I think we'll hear more during the course. Thank you very much for your presence. If anyone has a comment, has a question, either for Hitendra or Ron, I know Brad is on a set right now, but also for me regarding the CIP, I'm staying here for a few minutes. Thank you, Truls. Thank you, David.
Ron, while we wait for people, I'm curious really, of all the projects that you work with, which is the one where you felt, when you look back, the impact was there, and you tell your kids, I did that?
That's a tough one for me because to me, I'd rather kind of create a hybrid of the ones that were really successful. But for most of you don't know, but my father put a man on the moon. He was head of the propulsion systems and rockets. I don't have one moonshot story that says this is the kind of monument, the kind of success story. I have a lot that I put together in amalgams and different discussions, because everybody has a different challenge, a different culture, a different situation. I think that, you know, the criteria I would use is which ones have lasted the longest, which ones have been sustainable, which ones have created significant foundation for continuous change and continuous innovation to lead the world. The three that I mentioned are all, you know, kind of right up there, but particularly Verizon and JCI. But I think there are little ones, I mean, smaller companies, smaller things where we made huge differences for them. Again, there's not one that kind of jumps out. Certainly the work for Natura in Brazil that made them kind of the number one in kind of green cosmetics, or whatever you would want to call it, was certainly a journey that was of high impact, just as a specific one. And just getting Bunge listed on the New York Stock Exchange because we pulled out a technology and product that was buried in a commodity business was an event, was an episodic kind of innovation initiative that changed the world for them. So there's lots of little ones. I think, you know, I think that's the advantage of this certification program, is you get to share all those stories, and you get to pick the ones from other people participating in the training, not just the trainers, but from other people participating. You get to pick the ones that resonate for you. You get to make them your stories. And having been doing this, I'm 78 now, having doing this for, well, I can include what I did with my father's, you know, for close to 75 years. There are a lot of stories, huge number of stories, and putting them
For me,
together.
Ron,
Go ahead.
I see specific things that I can pull out from each one of the projects that I worked on. And Natura, one of the big things that we did was somebody else had gone in there on the innovation management system and put in a stage gate process. And they were going to do innovation step by step, following all the steps. And suddenly the process went to 15 months. It used to take 8 months, 9 months to do something. And they were doing it now in 15 months. It took even longer to do anything anymore. And so the idea was, how do you pull this thing to go faster innovation? And we broke so many rules. We made it so flexible, and the pipelines and all that kind of stuff. And that was impactful, where the speed at which outputs were coming out were far greater, as an example, Natura. And if I go to, like, say, Samex, we transformed the company in terms of seeing their world from a cement perspective into a construction industry perspective. And as a result of it, they got into financing, they got into bricks. They got into hardware stores, and they changed the definition of the business model they were in into something much bigger than that. And so I do think it'll be worthwhile for us to go through each of the companies and maybe write the one or two things we believe were the big transformation, whether it's Bungie, getting them out listed on Wall Street because we discovered lettucing was one of the side products of soy, or whether, and therefore that was more valuable than all the soy they were crushing, right? So there's a fantastic story on that. Or when we go to Braskem and we say we move them from plastics to green polymers, and that gave them a runway for the next 10 years of everybody believing they were the most innovative company on the planet, which created the innovation premiums, people working for them, partnering with them around the world, and then they went global as a result of that, right? Or if you were to go to even Johnson Controls as an example, where standing on that stage with a CEO who was not clear about what innovation was at all, right? And then making each of his people and him trusting his people to figure out what innovation is, along with us, was kind of a monumental moment to see that happen. So I think there were moments in those stories which are 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, which were the trigger points or the transformation that happened at the moment, and now they went down another trajectory. So that'll be good.
But that brings, I think, the whole thing for everybody who's still on the call. I think what you do, not only as part of the certification program or training program, but what you do immediately after or even before. So how do you form a team, form a network, strengthen them, make them a high performance team that you can build around a common language, road mapping, getting a clear roadmap for where you're going, but that you can pivot at every turn. I took the road less traveled by, or whatever path less traveled by. But I think, and doing it fast. I think there are all kinds of again, leverage you can pull, but kind of be ready, form a team and talk about what the barriers, drivers, and enablers are for innovation in your company and your organization, and begin to build a common, not only a common language, but a common kind of view of what's the compelling, as Atendra said earlier, the why of innovation, as well as the what, where, and how, and when.
Irula, can we wrap this up? Or
Yes.
other questions?
There is Melania has asked a question, and maybe she's asking, in LATAM, there are big companies that have plants all around the world. They have resources teams. On the other hand, there are small, medium companies that want to keep growing, but they have less of everything. What would be your advice for starting innovation nowadays? I believe.
Melania, do you mind turning on your camera so we know who we are talking to?
Okay, my video is on.
Yes.
Okay, good. Can you just add her on to the chat? So,
Thank you so
okay.
much.
So Melania, just first one quick question. Which organization are you from?
TDM International from Mexico with David.
Okay, very good. Got it.
Hi.
Thank you, Melania. So for me, much of Latin America for the longest time saw innovation as going to the US and Europe and seeing what they were doing and coming back with best practices. And those best practices were very successful, actually, because the local companies were not going to the US or Europe for new ideas for what was going on. Today, with the internet and everything else, I'm expecting unicorns to come out of Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, and we're seeing it. We're seeing unicorns coming out of that. So no longer is innovation only for the US, North America, North Asia, or whatever, right? So that's one thing. So what we do see is examples of great innovations in Mexico. Cemex, Bimbo, they're doing it. So you can use their, and of course, Telefonica and Claro's there too. And they're doing some amazing things. So you can use those companies as examples of why would you not want to do more. And same thing in Brazil, you got companies like Braskem, and you have companies like Natura, companies like Vale, who are global leaders, Embraer, global leaders. So you've got giants in your own countries to be role models to the other companies. So one is to set that aspiration. Who are we competing with? Can we go more global? And that will create a reason to think differently and act differently. As long as they think that the competition is just regional, and they've got some sort of competitive advantage because of regulation or something, they will not really do a lot more. So you got to increase the aspiration of the leaders to
You
do
also
more.
have to
That's my
find a
my
way.
mistake.
You also have to find a way for them to learn together, to share stories together, et cetera. So the program that Dave may have shared with you about the 10X program in Colombia, we trained, we developed, we worked through seminars, we certified over 500,000 different small to medium-sized companies in Colombia. Some of them had global aspirations. They all had aspirations to grow, to partner, to lead. And we did that in cohorts because you can't afford, nobody, not even us, can afford to do kind of consulting assignments for each individual companies. But if you get them together, whether it's with Monterrey Tech or somebody else, and with somebody who can bring stories to the table, they can all learn from those, and they can move much faster often than these larger companies. So they are by nature more nimble. And so if they have entrepreneurial leaders or leaders can be trusted by their staff, by their team, they can move fast. And so moving mountains in the old kind of Dr. Zeus book, climbing mountains, moving mountains, they can do. They just need the confidence, and they need the partners, they need the journey mapping that enables them to do it. And so there are countries, and I certainly use Colombia as a kind of exemplar of this, and be able to do what we call in Colombia the 10X program or the 2X program, which is driven to help companies, smaller companies, make rapid change.
Okay.
But I think the most important thing for everybody is it's not the knowledge, but it is the managing of the complexity and making sure people start and finish what they do. And innovation is harder than it looks. So once they start, they're having fun on the ideation and the post-its. But when they have to start making it real, that's when it's really hard. And you got to put time, energy, and even more creativity than you've ever imagined in your life, right? And so a lot of people think, okay, I was at a meeting, I told you an idea, now go do it. Well, those guys are blah, blah, blah people is what I call them. There are only the people who actually do, where the real creativity is, where the output is created. And there is the real magic that you must make your teams start and finish. You must make sure your individuals wake up every morning and experiment. And they don't find the first no and they give up. They fight for the yeses. They fight for the yeses and they make it happen. All my life, I've had people say, oh, I tried it and it didn't work. But what I will tell them is, you tried one way and you got to know. There are probably 1,000 ways. And of those, one of them will be a yes. And that's what makes an innovator. And that's what makes an entrepreneur. And if you're going to make teams go forward, you as leaders, the coaches and everything else need to know that your job is no is not an acceptable answer. And if you push a team hard enough, they will find a yes.
Thank you, Tendra. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.